Hello! Just a note that if you are listening to this on Spotify or Apple, I have started uploading the full videos onto YouTube under my channel, Rabbi Daniel Levine. Of course, if you're already watching this on YouTube, you are in the right place to see any and all of the videos. Just one more piece of housekeeping before we get to today's podcast. Later today, I'm going to be talking with Joe Walsh. For those who remember, Joe Walsh ran against President Trump and the Republican nominee for 2020. Of course, he lost that Republican primary, but then subsequently has been a fierce anti-Trump Republican advocate. And so now he is one of the leading members of Republicans for Harris, and he is also staunchly pro-Israel. So we are going to talk about any and all of that, and I think that will make a perfect corollary to today's podcast, where I had the honor of talking with Hillel Fuld. For those who know, Hillel is a prolific journalist and blogger, primarily about tech, but also about pro-Israel advocacy. Hillel has hundreds of thousands, if not millions of followers, and is hugely influential both in the world of tech and also in the wider Jewish world. We discuss and really debate any and all things Trump and Harris, centering around the question, who should Jews vote for in the upcoming election? And now I bring you Hillel Fuld. Welcome to J Life with Daniel. I'm your host, Rabbi Daniel Levine. Today on the podcast, we have Hillel Fuld, an influential tech journalist turned Israel advocate. Hillel, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I've been following your work for years, and I highly recommend that, listeners follow you. And I said before we started recording, sometimes I agree with you, sometimes I don't. You've been very vocal on American politics, especially vis-a-vis foreign policy to Israel. That's what I want to discuss. Give me sort of the bird's eye view. I mean, when you look at Harris's policy, when you look at Trump's policy, what is there to dislike about, the Biden-Harris policy? What do you maybe like, and what would you hope that can change in a, I'm assuming you're going to vote for Trump based off of, just reading your messaging. But let's start at sort of the bird's eye, and then we can narrow it down.
Sure. So a few things. First of all, we have to establish the premise that politics has become only negative politics, right? No one votes for the candidate because they like them anymore. I mean, nobody voted, people voted for Biden because he wasn't Trump. People voted for Trump because he wasn't Obama. And people voted for Bibi because he wasn't Lapid. And people voted. That's just how politics is nowadays. And it's sad. It's tragic because, I remember the days when there were good presidents, good prime ministers, right? Good leaders. And those days are gone. That's very sad. And I hope that changes. So let's start with that. Second of all, and this is a really important point. There's obviously a lot of emotion around politics in general, especially with an election like this, given all the just chaos in the world right now. But I think it's important to emphasize that while you want a president who represents you, you want a president who you can be proud of, who, is presidential, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that all that stuff is important. I'm not dismissing that. But if you have to choose, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, if you have to choose, what or who to vote for, if you have two, possibilities, one might have a more stable, let's call it personality, than the other, but the one with the less stable personality has better policies. And so we're not marrying this person. And again, I would love my president and my prime ministers and my leaders to be people who I would hire to babysit my kids. And it's sad that that's not the case. That being said, if I have to choose between, let's say, Kamala, who I would say she's presidential. I mean, that's also debatable, but her policies are not something that I could, with a clear conscience, support, versus Trump, who, let's just say it as it is. I mean, he's a narcissist, and I'm being nice, right? I mean, I would not hire him to babysit my kids. He says things that are just outrageous, and I feel like yelling to the, at my computer screen, who the hell taught this guy, to speak? Who trained this guy? Did he do any media training? But as much as I would love that not to be the case, at the end of the day, I'm voting for policy. And I don't know if I'm going to say Trump was the best president Israel's ever had. I don't know if I'm going to go that far, but Trump was very clearly in our corner, whether it's moving the embassy, whether it's Abraham Accords, the list is long. Trump is a supporter of Israel. I mean, that's just clear. Harris is not. And, I know that there are certain things that she has said because she can't break kind of policy or status quo. And so she has to say the words, Israel has a right to defend itself. But when, first of all, her administration, right? Let's just get that out of the way. I don't buy the whole, she's only vice president, you can't hold her accountable. Well, if you can't hold her accountable, then you can't give her praise either. And, I always say, you got to give a credit where credit is due. And for example, I know I'm a little bit all over the place. I'll tie it back in.
No, this is great.
Yesterday I posted something and I said I want to thank the administration because they made a very strong statement, and I said credit where credit is due, and I thanked them, right? And so if you're going to thank her as being part of this administration, you also have to hold her accountable for being part of this administration. And under no normal circumstances on any planet in any universe does it make sense in any way, shape, or form for an ally to threaten its ally in the middle of an existential war with an arms embargo. That is unheard of. That is unacceptable. And that for me is a red line. And that was a threat. But then there were actual delays in arms. And then there was a lot of discussion about what Israel can do. Don't go into Rafah. Yes, go into Rafah. With all due respect, Mr. President Biden and Vice President Harris, you're not going to tell us what we need to do to defend our citizens. Okay, we know what happens throughout history when we depend on a foreign government to protect us, including America. So on the one hand, I grew up in America. I have a ton of gratitude to the United States of America, and I also have a ton of gratitude to this administration. They've done amazing things for this for our country, but they've also done incredibly damaging things like releasing money to Iran, and many. The list is very, very long. And so while I appreciate their statements, sometimes stronger than others, and I appreciate their the sentiment that Israel does have a right to defend itself. If you're going to say Israel has a right to defend itself, then don't continue that sentence with "but" if they do it in my way and only my way. That's unacceptable. And so we went into Rafah, and I have to give Bibi a round of applause, Netanyahu, for standing up to the pressure that the United States put on him, and said we're going into Rafah. And we went into Rafah, and what we discovered there, to no one's surprise, were hundreds of terror tunnels miles long, and endless terrorists we eliminated, and senior Hamas officials. And that might have been the most pivotal moment in this entire war to date. And so the fact that America was telling Israel not to go into Rafah begs the question, what were they afraid of? And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but just to kind of sum up what I'm saying, I have a lot of gratitude towards America. I also have a lot of gratitude to this administration for many of the things that they did to support Israel. But at the end of the day, I'm going to vote for policy. And again, I do not like Donald Trump on a personal level. I don't know him personally, but I don't like the things that he says. I think they're outrageous, and I think they're childish. And I'm being nice. At best, they're childish. At worst, they're a lot worse than that. But I like his policies. I don't like the person. I like his policies. I don't like Kamala. I don't like the things she says, both as a person and as her policy. To me, it's a clear choice, but it's the less of the evils, not, oh, this is an ideal candidate. That is not the situation. And, I know the emotion. I know whenever I post about anything to do with politics, I get thousands of messages from both sides, and so it's a complex situation. But if you're asking me as a Jew who lives in Israel, who has a long-standing relationship and friendship with the United States of America, if you're asking me which one of the two candidates will hold and maintain that relationship, to me it's a clear answer, and the answer is Donald Trump.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'll get to Donald Trump in a minute. I'll play a little bit of the devil's advocate. Staying on the Harris, Biden, I'll include Obama there, John Kerry's in the mix. It has been striking that they have just consistently been wrong. And I think, I'm curious to run this by you, my entire life just following American politics through the lens of Israel or vice versa. The Democrats always seem to assume that at baseline, everybody just wants, material prosperity and security. And so their policy has consistently been diplomacy first, because at the end of the day, everybody just wants to live in peace. And I think that's just a misread of how the Middle East works. And so, you had mentioned, obviously, going into Rafah, it's the same thing with Lebanon now that we're seeing, the Biden administration is, applauding the killing of Nasrallah and also urging constraint and diplomacy. And, it's sort of confusing. It's the same thing that was a viral or now infamous viral, statement of John Kerry basically a couple years ago saying that peace with any of the Arab Sunni countries would be impossible until a two-state solution. And of course, the Abraham Accords proved that wrong. Do you think the Democrats are, because you get a lot of different opinions in the Jewish community, at sort of the more, I'll say, extreme or, the far side of the American Jewish right, you have, the Democrats are anti-Israel or they hate Israel. In my opinion, it's just, they're just wrong about Israel, right? I don't think they hate Israel. I have a feeling, Obama, Biden, and Harris, they like Israel. I think they view Israel as an important ally. Maybe they're putting a little bit too much pressure, which is annoying. But I think it's more that they're wrong than it is that they have a dislike. I'm curious what you think about that.
I think that's a very naive way. It's a naive take. You don't misunderstand Israel, not come to Congress when the Israeli prime minister comes to speak to Congress. That's not out of a lack of understanding. It's an animosity thing, right? And you see who Harris is surrounding herself with. I mean, some of her her closest advisors are full blown anti-Semites, like literally full blown anti-Semites. Not even like, oh, we're anti-Zionists, full blown anti-Semites. And some of the things that they both said, I remember there was an instance where Biden, his mic was on and he cursed out Netanyahu. And by the way, I didn't vote for Netanyahu. You can be pro-Israel and anti-Netanyahu. I have no problem with you questioning his policies. But once we get into the area of, Zionism, which is a very simple movement that says that the Jewish people have a right to come back to their eternal homeland. And if you're against that, then what you're in essence saying is that the state of Israel doesn't have a right to exist. That is over the line of, let's talk policy. No, if you say Israel doesn't have a right to exist, you're an anti-Semite. Like, let's not sugarcoat this, right? And so the discussion, about anti-Zionism is just one big facade and it's charade. It's ridiculous. Let's just remove that mask. If you're anti-Zionist, you're anti-Semitic. Like 95% of Jews are Zionists. You cannot be anti-Zionism without being anti-Jewish any more than you could be anti-Jesus without being anti-Christian. It's a silly sentiment and a silly statement. Now, do I think, I don't know, Biden's, pro-terrorism, or obviously not, right? But I do think that they do not, in my opinion, value the importance and the strategic advantage of the friendship between Israel and America. And I think that the pressure, I wouldn't want to be in their shoes because, they're being pressured, by the encampments and the liberal and the, so it's hard to see exactly what's really going on in their hearts. But the only way for me to judge that is based on the things they've said and the things they've done. And it seems to me that they do have some very negative emotion and sentiment towards Israel.
Yeah, when it comes to Biden, I mean, I kind of separate Biden and Harris. I'm curious if you would, agree with this distinction. I mean, Biden, as he often has said, every time he gets a chance, he's known Israeli prime ministers back since the 60s or 70s. He clearly, I mean, he's, publicly called himself a Zionist many times at a time when basically anybody under 30, especially on college campus, that's, an automatic, oh my God, he said, being a Zionist in liberal circles on campus now is basically like walking into a room and saying, hi, I'm Daniel, I'm a white supremacist. Nice to meet you. I mean, it really is the same, in a lot of colleges. Harris is a little bit different because it kind of seems like she is constantly just oscillating between center left and far left. And it kind of just seems like she's following the wind in a lot of ways. She has taken some stances that have impressed me. I mean, her statement on the killing of Nasrallah, I mean, it is a very low bar to basically admit that, this terrible person was killed. I mean, there were probably more people celebrating in Iran and Syria than there were, in liberal cities in America, which I think is very telling. But it seems like Harris, at least, to call her anti-Israel, in my opinion, goes a little bit too far. Maybe her policies on Israel aren't great, but I mean, say she does get elected. I mean, it doesn't really seem like there is a future in which America really cuts aid. I mean, as you mentioned before, I mean, the strategic alliance possibly helps America more than Israel at this point. I mean, Israel would probably be able to defend itself and raise the money and all of that. I mean, there's so much. I mean, Israel obviously can ally itself even deeper with India or China, right? There's a lot of, international relations that have potential there. America really does rely on Israel for so much, not just tech, but, cybersecurity and also influence in the Middle East there. So even if Kamala Harris, really would want to move further to the left, it just kind of seems like that would be blocked just by strategic value or just material necessity. I don't know. I'm curious to run that by you.
So, I mean, I could answer that question on a pragmatic level, or I think the right way to do this is to take a step back. Let's take a step back and look at history, okay? Because the statement that you just made that you don't see a scenario that America cuts off aid, like, again, like that is the epitome of like naive. I mean, I don't know what you're basing that on. Like, what do you mean you don't see a scenario? I look at history. I mean, the script is, we all know the expression history repeats itself, right? But for some reason, while we know that expression, nobody looks at history books to figure out what's about to happen.
Sure. And I guess I'll tailor it a little bit, right? There obviously is a scenario, but America, assuming America stays the general intact democratic country that it is, that wants to have some influence in the international community, Israel is one of the cornerstone alliances for that, so any more than you can say, okay, there probably is a future in which America completely ditches any allegiance to NATO. We can talk about, isolationism on the right in a minute. Sure, but within any normative, the world has a lot bigger problems, in my opinion, than American aid to Israel if America is at a position where they are no longer viewing Israel as a strategic ally.
You're forgetting one really important point here, and I think that this is something. And I hope we remain friends after this call because
No, this was exactly, it was funny because I was talking to some friends of mine, before this, and I said, exactly why I wanted to have you on, because I look at a lot of your messaging and I have a lot of respect for it. And sometimes I'm like, yes, totally agree. And other times I'm like, I would love to talk to him about that. So no, I have, it would be boring if we agreed on everything.
Yeah. So you're forgetting one really important point here. You're analyzing this purely from a logical perspective, which is fine. That's great. We're supposed to be living in a logical world. So let's accept this one thing that you're forgetting, and that is that there is no logic to the hatred of Jews, right? I mean, literally, what have the Jews done for this world other than amazing things, right? I mean, Nobel Prizes, first on scene when there's a natural disaster, every leading cancer research, breakthrough Israel, every single device that we're all using Israel, and the list just goes on. And Israel's been, and the Jewish people have been nothing but a source of light in this world. And yet, majority of the world hates us. So if you're talking logic, then there wouldn't be such a thing called anti-Semitism. But when it comes to the Jews, there is no logic. And they hated us when we were not white enough in Germany. Now they hate us too white, right? We're white colonialists. They hated us when we were poor. They hate us when we're rich. There's no logic behind the hatred of Jews. And so, yes, if you look purely from a strategic, logical, rational, reasonable perspective, then America will always be an ally of Israel. Except there's anti-Semitism, and that makes no sense. And so what I think the right way to do this is to look at history. And, again, I'm not here to say I'm a prophet, right? I'm not a prophet, but the fact of the matter is 3 days before October 7th, and you can go verify this yourself, on my social media, I wrote, literally on all my social media 2 days before, I wrote, if you're paying attention to geopolitics right now between Russia and Ukraine, America and Iran, America and China, internal politics in America, internal politics, and you don't think that something big is about to happen, you're not paying attention. And I wrote in the post, Israel will be at the center of it. You can go read it, right? Now, how did I know that? Not because I'm a prophet, but because my eyes are open and I've learned history. And so we know that history repeats itself. So let's look at history. What has happened? The answer is it's the same exact script. There's an empire, okay? There is the ancient Egyptian empire, the Babylonian empire, the Roman empire, the Greek empire, the Soviet empire, the Nazi empire, and the list just keeps going on and on and on, okay? There's an empire, and the empire grows and grows in power and influence, and it reaches unparalleled, unprecedented global influence, and it just dominates the world. As soon as it does that, and now we're going to get a little controversial here, and you'll forgive me. As soon as it does that, it throws morality out the window. That's the first thing it does. It puts people to fight in the Colosseum to their death, and it gets rid of gender. It gets rid of the most foundational, fundamental morals and everything that is just true. I don't know. I know that sounds like just truth goes out the window, right? Truth is no longer a virtue. Now, when that happens, this empire says, okay, we don't want morality shoved down our throat. We don't want you telling me that, murder is wrong or rape is wrong. I don't want to hear this stuff. So what do? They have to come after the source of morality. The source of morality, again, objectively speaking, if you just look throughout history, is the Bible, right? Murder and rape was moral until the Bible said it's not. And so they have to come after the Bible. Now, they can't come after the creator of the Bible because that's God. So what do? They come after FedEx, right? They come after the messenger. You kill FedEx, you don't get your package, right? So they come after us. And as soon as they do that, in every generation, like it's like clockwork, us, the Jewish people, excuse me for saying it, like idiots, think that we could say to them, hey, Romans, don't hate us. We're just like you. Just like you, Romans. In fact, we're more Roman than you, Romans. We are more Greek than you. In fact, America, we are the most liberal people in America today, us Jews. We are more American than you. How could you hate us, right? And then that empire says, no. Listen, you Jews, you're not the same as us. In fact, we have a tool that we've developed to prove to you that you're not just like us. And it's called anti-Semitism. And then it hits, right? It goes crazy, right? Then it spikes. As soon as it spikes, the empire falls, right? Now, of course, I'm oversimplifying it in a major way, right? But that is the script. Now,
if America really does fall in the next 20 years, I'm really going to start seeing you as a prophet. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, but it's not America. It's not America. It's the West. And again, you're talking about 20 years. Has Europe not fallen? Has Canada not fallen? I mean, literally, how would you define an empire falling if you do not define what's going on in Montreal today as having fallen, finished?
Just for listeners who might not be aware, can you go into a little bit Europe and Canada?
Sure. I mean, I was in Montreal a few months ago. I was in Toronto a few months ago. You can't walk 5 feet. You can't walk 5 feet without violent Palestinian mobs without billboards all over the place, calling Zionists, whatever they call them, on bus stops, you name it, like just full blown mainstream society anti-Semitism, right? I mean, listen, in Europe, there's already literal places of Sharia law. Like there's literal neighborhoods and towns for Muslims to live where everyone else is infidels. And we know what the Quran says about what you need to do to infidels, right? So Europe, I don't think it's accurate to say it will take 20 years. I think we're there, right? Can you still walk around the streets in Europe? Yes. If you're wearing a kippah, absolutely not, right? So to me, it's fallen, and that is the West, and America is coming unless somehow it makes a 180. But again, history shows that it won't make a 180, and so the Jews are being scapegoated right now in mainstream American society from obviously academia. I mean, listen, here's the bottom line, Rabbi. Okay, again, like, you might find this to be a bit harsh, maybe your listeners will, but I can't help it. This is the truth, and I believe it to my core, and I can't not speak out. Okay, here's my question, and I want you to be honest with me. I know you're interviewing me, but I'm going to ask you a question.
Yeah, go for it.
If I told you, please be honest with me. If I told you 10 years ago, all right, 10 years ago, I said to you, Rabbi, in 10 years from now, there's going to be anti-Semites in Congress. There are going to be synagogues that are vandalized with swastikas. There are going to be Jews have their windows shattered and are beaten half to death in the streets of LA and New York. And the judicial system in the United States will have to force academic institutions to let Jews walk around freely on campus. I say to you, that's going to happen in 10 years from now. What will your reaction be? You would say to me, if that happens, I'm out of here. There's no way that you can't come back from that. That's a point of no return. The genie's out of the bottle. It's not going back. And yet here we are with all of those things. They all happened. And so I say to my friends in America, what has to happen, right? Because if I put a gun to your head and I said to you, if you're not on an El Al plane in 1 hour from now, I'm pulling the trigger. All of a sudden, all of the questions of, we have to stay in America and stand up for ourselves, and, it's hard to move to Israel, I don't know the language, they would disappear because you have a gun to your head. And so I asked my friends, what constitutes a gun? If what's going on right now doesn't constitute a gun, what does? And I literally have asked my friends this question, and the answers are mind-boggling, because I grew up asking myself this question my whole life. How did my grandmother not leave? When it was rhetoric, that's one thing, but there were legislation against Jews. What were they thinking? And now I speak to my friends in Teaneck and in Woodmere and wherever, and they say the same thing. It doesn't affect me. It doesn't affect you? Get in your car, drive for 2 minutes. 2 minutes, and you'll be harassed on the streets. Doesn't affect you? What does that mean? What has to happen? What, you have to be murdered for you to get on a plane? It's mind-boggling. But again, history repeats itself. Back to the Bible. In the Bible, we know this, 80% of the Israelites, after everything God did, 10 plagues, 80% stayed in Egypt. What were they thinking? I'll tell you what they were thinking. They were saying to themselves, I'm Egyptian. I was born here. My parents and my grandparents were born here. Don't talk to me about the land of milk and honey. I'm staying here. I am Egyptian. And you know what? Yeah, I'm a slave, but I have a roof over my head and I'm staying here. That was one narrative that the Israelites told themselves. There was another narrative in the Bible, and that was the story of the spies. 10 of the biggest rabbis of the generation spoke badly about the land of Israel. How could that be? What was their narrative? How could they? We don't even think about this stuff. Like, it's an unbelievable story. 10 of the biggest rabbis. God says, go into the land. 10 of the biggest rabbis say, don't go in. How's that even possible? I'll tell you how it's possible. Because their narrative was, I'm in the desert right now, right? I have food coming down from the sky, from the heavens. I have clouds of glory protecting me, and I have God, a direct line of communication with God. I am from, as we call it, I am very religious here. I'm very spiritual. Going into a country where I have to join an army and build an economy, I'd rather stay here. What are the two narratives that American Jews are telling themselves today? Half of them are saying, I'm American. Tell me to run away to go to Israel. I have to stand here. I'm American. And then there's the right wing, the more, not politically, the religious right wing, the more religious Jews, who's saying, I can't go to Israel. My kids will go off the derech. My kids will be less religious. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me, right? This is the same narratives. We're repeating the same things over and over again. And so we're at the place right now where we're trying to prove to the Americans, we're more American than you. Look, we're voting for Kamala. Yay, she hates Israel, but I don't care because I'm more liberal than you. And America's like, dude, there's nothing you can do, man. You can't walk around on campus in Harvard. I don't care. I don't care how pro-Palestinian. You're Jewish. You cannot walk around. We're like, no, don't hate up. It's the same thing. It's happening again, and we don't see it. Like, it's unbelievable. We've literal a blindfold over our heads. And so, I would want nothing more in the world than to be wrong here. But if history is any indication, the anti-Semitism is only going to increase. It will become just completely unsafe for Jews to walk around the streets of most big cities in America? Will there be concentration camps in America? No. But just like in Germany, they didn't think it would be like Spain, and in Spain, they didn't think it was going to be like. So it will be different because in every generation it takes on a different face. But the anti-Semitism is about to go through the roof in America, and when that happens, it's going to follow in the footsteps of every other large city that has just fallen to radical Islam. Again, immigration, I'm not even going to talk about this stuff, but when millions and millions of people are coming in, now I sound like Trump, millions and millions, when millions of people are when millions of people are coming in illegally, and not only are we not stopping them, but we're glorifying that, and then we're giving them the right to vote when these people are not loyal to Western values. It is mind-boggling how blind we can be. And so if anything is going to stop this script from coming to fruition and making it till the end, it's someone who will stop that, that mass immigration of radical Islamists coming into the United States to spread their Sharia law. If that's not stopped, then we're talking a matter of years before Western civilization as a whole, in terms of its value and value system, falls to radical Islam. I'm not a prophet. This is history.
Okay, a lot to respond to. One, I just want to flag for listeners. I mean, Douglas Murray has a great book called The Strange Death of Europe, where he sort of goes into a lot of what's been happening in Europe. It sort of echoes a lot of what you're saying, hopefully won't, but, might or is probable, in your words, to happen here. Just to flag that for listeners. I do think, I totally agree with you with the 10 years ago thing. I think, would have sort of been beyond most of our wild dreams. I do think that's where, one, I do think if you're an American Jew and haven't considered making Aliyah in the last year, you're not paying any attention. So, I think, people living in Teaneck might be a little bit more sheltered than people living, out on college campuses in California. When I walk through to, teach my course and, I have to walk through a globalize the Intifada sign, it, of course, sparks some questions. I do think one interesting difference between, say, Spain or Germany or, the Roman Empire and everything there is we do have a state of Israel that is founded on basically a rejection of this, liberalism in some way, right? Herzl's whole point was, okay, we tried the liberalism in Western Europe, and we tried to say, okay, all men or all people are created equal, and we were the only ones who actually practiced that. And this just led to more anti-Semitism. Therefore, Jews need a state and army that can protect itself. Do you not think that it's important? One of the ways in which I'm thinking about is the future of the West, I think, is extremely important, and America is still the cornerstone of the West. So is it not able to be saved? Do you think it's not worth being tried to save? Do you think Jews should just jump ship and move to Israel and, sort of give up on the West? And, the other sort of geopolitical formulation, Israel obviously has been debating back and forth of how much to ally itself with, China and India and, Saudi Arabia and all those countries that are, illiberal. You could throw Hungary into the mix there as well. Do you think Israel should just make that switch and basically give up on, Germany and France and, just turn to India and China whenever it needs to do arms deals?
So again, I'm going to give a disclaimer and say, I hope you don't hate me after saying this, but I don't think I've ever heard anything more hypocritical in my life. Like, it can happen here because we have Israel, but we're not going to support Israel by voting for the candidate that's supporting Israel. We're going to say, I'm going to vote for Kamala, even though she hates Israel, because I'm American and I don't care about her policy on Israel. I'm not voting for Israel. I'm voting for America, but I know that I'll be okay because there's Israel. What?
So just to reframe it, I think the argument would go, if you think America and the wider West is a project worth saving, which I do, just the wider idea of liberal democracy, right? I'm not willing to put all the Jewish eggs in that basket because it's failed. But I think generally, if the world, right, forget Jews for a second, if the world is going to survive for the next, 50, 100 years with proliferation of, nuclear weapons and ability to spread disease and AI and all these things that we actually need, mature adults to handle, we do need strong liberal democratic countries like America. The case against Trump is a lot more big picture, right? So on policy, I agree with most of Trump's Middle East policies compared to, the Biden-Harris administration. It's more that you think, the argument in America and where most American Jews are at, although I should say as an aside, I do think we'll have record number of American Jews voting for Trump this election. I think a lot of them are too afraid to tell pollsters, but just talking to, younger Jews, I think, 50% of Jews under 30 in America are going to vote for Trump. Someone can quote me on that in a month and a half from now. Is the argument that Trump is eroding liberal democracy to such an extent that the norms of America are sort of broken, and maybe it leads to some sort of again, I'm not a doomsdayist, so I don't think there'll be anything like a civil war. But again, just refusing to accept the results of an election mixed with the sort of Trump and JD Vance, right? Sidebar: if Trump was Nikki Haley, I don't even think this would be a conversation, right? I think every Jew in the country should endorse Nikki Haley, right now, and basically get over it. Trump brings in both an eroding of democratic norms along with the sort of new strain of isolationism where I don't even know. I mean, Trump, at least as of recording, it's 8:30 a.m. Pacific time, October 1st. Trump's been silent, at least from everything I've seen on what's been happening in Lebanon, right? Like, I don't even know where Trump is at in terms of foreign aid. I know where he's at in terms of Ukraine, but I wouldn't be shocked if JD Vance and Trump decided to cut aid to Israel. I'm basically putting it at the same percentage of a Harris policy. So I think it's more, if you want America to thrive in the future, Harris is the choice, even if you have to, take the loss on a couple policies. At least America, big picture, will survive for the next 4 years. I think that's more the argument, but I would love to hear.
Okay, so first of all, I can't actually believe that you said that you think that the chances of Trump cutting aid to Israel is equivalent to the chances of the Biden. That's again, it's just an opinion thing. I can't say you're right or wrong. I think that's crazy. I don't know, but again, we have to get to the fundamentals here, right? Because people like to say you're a one issue voter, right? I mean, everyone I hear, voting for Kamala is voting because of women's rights or, women's reproductive rights or, or immigration. Everyone has the issue that's important to them. Okay. And I don't think there's anything wrong with an American Jew saying, I realize that the Holocaust could not happen again because I have Israel. And so therefore I have to get behind Israel. And there's one candidate who has proven that his policies are pro-Israel. And there's one candidate who has proven otherwise. And I'm sorry, if you don't like me voting, on a one policy thing, then don't push me in the corner and not let me walk around campuses in America to the point that I have to vote for Trump, even though I don't like him. Right? That's the reality right now. So again, you'll forgive me for saying this, and I'm like, this is going to piss off a lot of
hopefully by now you realize nothing you can say will stop us from remaining friends after this. Don't worry.
I cannot imagine, and I try a lot actually, because I want to get into the shoes of my brothers and sisters. I cannot imagine how a Jew in 2024 could possibly vote for Kamala Harris. I cannot even understand it. I cannot fathom it. It is mind-blowing to me. And it is, in my opinion, a clear repetition of the same thing over again, where we're trying to assimilate and be like our hosts, and our hosts are saying, we're not just like us, and we're trying our hardest to appease and to be like and to fit in, and we're not fitting in, and it's not going to work, and it's not going to change anything. But we are naive in every generation to think it will. There is no, in my mind, I can't even understand any justification. Yes, if you care more about abortion, great. So you're voting for Kamala based on abortion. So just realize you're an American Jew, and the only reason that you will not be exterminated and sent to gas chambers, in quotes, because it won't be gas chambers, but you will not be exterminated is because you have Israel. So Israel's there for you, but you're not there for Israel. I can't think of anything more hypocritical than that. And so, to me, it's an erosion of Jewish values and Jewish identity when a person who identifies as a Jew, a person who is a Jew, can vote for Kamala at this point. It blows my mind. I'm just being.
I appreciate that, and I do think you represent a growing, still probably a minority, but a growing number of American Jews. Again, I said before what I think in terms of the polling. Talking to young American Jews, especially those on college campuses, I think are going to swing right. In my opinion, I actually think Congress is a different story. I want Congress to be Republican because I trust the general Republican House of Representatives more than I do Trump. I mean, there's something about Trump. Again, Trump is not a typical politician, Republican, in the sense of, I do fear, JD Vance, we don't really know what his foreign policy positions are. He's obviously pro-Israel, but he's also an isolationist. So I mean, that's sort of the reasoning behind why I think there is a good chance. Not a good chance. Again, I don't think the chance of either of them cutting aid to Israel is high. It obviously exists. But I do think, you do have this growing strain on the right that is becoming increasingly isolationist, that wants to defund NATO, that wants to, stop giving resources to Ukraine, not to get into that debate. I wouldn't be shocked if, at some rally or something like that, Trump, tries it out. Even with the war in Gaza, at some recent, rallies, he said, we have to end this war very quickly. Some statements that seem to be in opposition to again, letting Israel finish the job, which I think we'd probably both agree is the correct policy there. I think also, on the other hand, I mean, I don't think very few American Jews that I know are voting because they like Kamala Harris. I mean, as you said before, negative partisanship is sort of the name of the game. It really is just that they think that Trump is some wider existential threat to the norms of democracy there. So it really is, I mean, the way that I view it, honestly, is, it's buying another couple of years of normal democratic norms. I mean, I wouldn't want a far left populist to come in 4 years and basically refuse to admit that the election was lost and everything there. I mean, I can easily see that happening on the left just as the right. I mean, I think they're both equally as populist on their, off their center. So I think that's more the argument than, okay, you obviously have the progressive American Jews who, again, I walk around publicly with a kippah, everybody knows, who I am. So I see anti-Semitism a lot more vividly than, again, if your name is Bob and you're walking around and, you only show up to shul on Yom Kippur, once a year, and maybe your kid has a bar mitzvah, like, you probably don't notice anti-Semitism as much if you're not looking out for it and if you're not presenting as Jewish. That person maybe is, okay, fine, they're cutting their losses and just saying, Kamala Harris, we want a female president and abortion and, all these, social policies that, beyond the scope of this conversation. But I think that really is the argument against Trump, is really these erosion of democratic norms, not naivety on, well, it actually seems like, the left wing's international policy is better. Because I know very few people who are voting for the left, Jews that are voting for the left because they think Kamala Harris will be better for Israel.
Right. So this is the conversation that I have every day, and it drives me absolutely crazy, right? Because, whenever I talk about this election, right? So if I say anything negative about, Kamala and the Biden administration, I get hundreds of messages from liberal Jews coming at me. How could you vote for Trump? And I'm like, listen, put Trump aside for 1 second. Why are you voting for Kamala, right? And so I say, she was part of this administration. Do you see what this administration did to America? Do you see what this administration did to the world? Like, the world is falling apart. So what's their answer? Okay, but she's just a vice president. She doesn't have that much influence. Okay, great, no problem. So we're removing her activity as a vice president. So what gives her, the capabilities or, the repertoire or anything to become president? Is it her policy? What are our policies? What are our policies on anything? She can't even do a freaking interview. Like, so you can't have it both ways. If you think she's worthy of being president because she's been vice president, because she was, all of her background and her experience, then you have to admit that she's been part of this, absolute disaster of a government where millions of people coming in, and that was her job, the border. If you're going to say that she was vice president and that therefore she had no influence, then let's talk about her policies. If you're going to talk about her policies, tell me what her policies are, and don't go back to the fact that she was vice president. They're eating their cake and they're keeping it whole. It's crazy to me, and these are intelligent people. But the answer is that, again, please forgive me, whoever's listening, and this offends you, but there is a real Trump derangement syndrome, and it's not just Trump. It's a Bibi derangement syndrome too. I post anything. It's wild. I post anything on social media. It's a nice day outside. Someone in the comments will say, but Bibi Netanyahu is a narcissist. I'm like, why would you bring that up? Like, what? It's unbelievable. I can talk about anything and I will be attacked by the left for supporting Trump, and I didn't say a word about Trump. Nowhere did I say I'm supporting Trump, by the way, nowhere. I have my opinions, and I've shared positive and negative opinions about the administration. I'm not, denying anything, but I've not got up into I'm a Trump, I'm a MAGA, and I get attacked nonstop for that. I didn't vote for Bibi, and I'm like Mr. Bibi in this. I was like, oh, it's the Bibi. I didn't vote for Bibi. But there's this syndrome where it's like they hate so much. I mean, again, we're not talking about Israeli politics, but just think about the hundreds of thousands of Israelis taking to the streets. Why are they on the streets? Because if you look over the last X amount of years, all of those years Netanyahu was in office, their protests in the streets have taken on a new agenda every single time. If it was COVID, it was judicial reform, it was the hostages. It's all the same thing. They want Bibi out of office, right? And by the way, not once and not twice have people gone to those protests and said, "You're protesting for the hostages? Great. If we got all the hostages out tomorrow, but Netanyahu stayed in office for the next 20 years, would you take that deal?" Every single one of them said no. Every single one of them. And okay, maybe it was edited for internet purposes, whatever. Right. But the reality is that many of those people, like the people who are in the encampments on campuses, have no idea what the hell they're talking about. They do not know from what river to what sea. They do not even know what intifada is. Globalized intifada, you are literally calling for genocide. Do you even know what intifada means? The answer is no, they don't. So they're standing there, and in general, that's the encampments, but it's a broader issue, which is we hate Trump so much that even though he's going to be the one that will protect us at the end of the day when this empire comes after us, like every other empire came after us, even though Israel will have our back, we're not going to have their back because we hate Trump so much. It's like, what is wrong with you? How could you even say that? But that's the reality. And again, it's the reality we see in every generation. This is what we do.
There definitely is a lack of ability to think with any type of nuance. I mean, I see the same thing with Bibi also. I mean, I was not a fan of the judicial reform, but I mean, I think, Bibi's done good things and bad things. I mean, I think he should get a lot of props for the last week in Lebanon. I mean, I hope people that are criticizing him, as I have, many times in the last year, I mean, I want to do a whole separate podcast on giving basically Bibi and the Israeli intelligence agency. I mean, the last week was incredible what they were able to accomplish in Lebanon, basically on every single angle.
Despite the United States of America.
Yeah, I can still hear listeners sort of, screaming into the podcast. It's not like Kamala Harris allied herself with the encampments, right? I mean, you had the DNC where they basically weren't even allowed inside. They were basically, a couple blocks there. She hasn't been as harsh on the encampments as I would want, but she's hardly cozying up to them. I mean, there is a movement on the far left, of course, you're aware of this, to not vote for Kamala Harris and instead vote for Jill Stein or one of these insane people, on the far left instead, because they think Kamala Harris is, a Zionist and too pro-Israel, even as you wrote the other day. I mean, she still is giving aid to Israel. And so are you just afraid that she's just doing this to get elected and she's going to slide to the left? Or just only because, I mean, the same way when I have friends on the left that say that, how can somebody consider voting for Trump? He invited people like Nick Fuentes or, Kanye West or recently Tucker Carlson, right? All these, alt-right, anti-Semitic figures in American politics. I say, okay, well, that's not, Trump has distanced himself from them. Again, it's not to say nothing about whether or not I'm going to vote for Trump or his policies. You can't say Trump equals Nick Fuentes any more than you can say Kamala Harris equals, people on campus screaming intifada. So I'm curious, I mean, for listeners that are saying, you're right, I agree with you about, I would not vote for a, far left wing history teacher for president. I mean, Jill Stein is basically the epitome of, left-wing academic, come politician. I think at one rally she said the Jews should just go back to Poland, type, IQ. But for Kamala Harris, I mean, I've taken students for years to APAC when they still did their, bigger conferences before they shifted after COVID. She was at a couple of the APACs. I mean, she spoke. I mean, she clearly isn't on the level of, even River. I mean, she condemns that unequivocally. Yeah.
I'm not comparing it, but at the end of the day, especially given the fact that she is very incoherent and again, I'm being nice about what are your policies? Just tell me your freaking policies. What are they? And since she doesn't have clear policies, the only thing that's worth paying attention to is who's advising her, who are the people she's surrounding herself with, and the people she's surrounding herself with are full-blown anti-Semites. So if she was someone with strong convictions and strong, ethics and morals and values and clear policies, then I wouldn't be that worried. That's not the case. She hasn't stated clearly what she thinks about anything. So the only people that are worth paying attention to are the people that she surrounds herself with. And those people are very scary. But to get on a little more of a practical level, right? Let's talk for 1 second about the actual, let's call it, policies surrounding Israel. And again, I know I sound like a broken record. What I'm about to say is definitely controversial. Okay, anybody who supports the two-state solution today is anti-Israel. Let me just repeat that, and then I'll explain what I mean. If you today support a two-state solution, you are anti-Israel. Okay, your policy of supporting a two-state solution will cause immediate harm, militarily, diplomatically, politically, to the state of Israel. Now, I don't know how much you want to get into this, but it really is just another item on the long, long, long list of absolute ridiculousness that's going on today surrounding this conflict. There has not been a Palestinian leader ever who said, let's have a state alongside the Jews. A two-state solution is not on the table. There's no other side. Even if Israel, for whatever reason, wanted to commit suicide and say, let's live alongside these people who just raped our wives and burned our families, there's no one on the other side that says they accept a two-state solution. So what are you even talking about right now? You're dictating to Israel to force Israel to live alongside people who have declared in their charters that they exist for Israel not to exist. Okay, this isn't the thing of occupation, because pre-occupation, 1929, pre the state of Israel, Hebron massacre, Arabs massacring Jews. Why? For the future occupation? The whole thing, the whole narrative is just one big lie, and it's a justification to hurt the only Jewish state. So to me, yes, I write that off as anti-Semitism. There is no option for a two-state solution after what and people like, so it's not Palestinians, it's Hamas. Do you understand? And the list is so long. Do you understand that Hitler had about 30, 35, 40% support in Nazi Germany? 60 whatever percent of them did not support, and yet no one questioned that the Allies had to quote unquote cleanse Germany and denazify it. No one had any questions about that. Hamas has 80% support in Gaza. The entire population of Gaza either supports Hamas, voted for Hamas, attacked on October 7th, or hides hostages in their houses. And yes, there are some people who don't fall into any of those categories, just like in every war. Innocents die. But the support that Hamas has in Gaza is more support than any evil regime has ever had that everyone agreed needed to be destroyed. So again, any thought at this point right now to have a two-state solution or to even sit at a negotiation table with these people who call themselves Palestinians, who have defined in their charter, the PLO, pre-occupation, what were they liberating? There was no occupation. Their goal, as it says in their charter, is to destroy Israel. They don't want a two-state solution. They want a one-state solution to erase Israel. And that's what from the river to the sea means. That's what intifada means. Kill all the Jews. Real genocide, not the lie that they're telling you about Gaza. Real genocide. And they're not ashamed. They're proud of it. The Nazis drank themselves to sleep every night because they were ashamed. They hid what they were doing. Hamas live streamed it with their GoPros. Okay, so I'm not saying they're worse than the Nazis. Of course, the Nazis killed 6 million Jews, but let's not kid ourselves. If Hamas could kill 6 million Jews, they'd do that in a second. They wouldn't even hesitate for a second. So I'm not into the comparison thing, but the reality is today, if anyone utters the words two-state solution, to me, that's a tremendous red flag that they are not in our corner. And, again, I don't even know if Trump, what he thinks in his heart. All I know is that he's not pushing for that. And the Harris-Biden administration has nonstop pushed for that. And to me, again, today, I want to be very clear, I would love nothing more than to have peace with our neighbors. And it's possible. There's precedent. We did it with Jordan. We did it with Egypt. We did it with Dubai or the UAE. It's been done. But first we have to denazify. First we have to re-educate and in our current situation right now, when the society in Gaza and in Judea and Samaria and in Palestinian Authority is so deeply indoctrinated and so deeply rotten, to say that we should sit at a negotiation table with these people and live alongside them, assuming they would ever agree to that, which they won't, to say that today after what they did to us, to me, that is the epitome of being anti-Israel.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I would still think that's just more naivety among the Democrats of, again, just going back to what I said 20 minutes ago, of just them viewing this through material resources and if only there was a little bit more peace, or there was a little bit fewer checkpoints, or people in Gaza had a little bit more economic, of course I don't agree with that. I mean, the saddest thing about October 7th, I mean, I took 2 trips to Israel since October 7th. And so visiting a lot of the kibbutzim in the south, which just, this, but just for listeners, the southern kibbutzim were very left-wing, as most kibbutzim are. And so a lot of them actually, one, they had workers that were coming in, daily from Gaza that now we know were actually, plotting out neighborhoods and where to best attack. 2, there were actually initiatives on many of these kibbutzim where, people from the kibbutz would actually drive sick Gazans to Israeli hospitals to get better healthcare and back and forth. And some of those people were also participating in, the October 7th massacre, again, to say nothing about, media and the UN. And, I'm sure we'd probably agree more on that. The last question that I just want to get to, because I think, circling around all of this is maybe an assumption or based off of the premise that it is important for Israel to continuously receive American aid, which has been criticized by those, both obviously on the far left in America, but also on the Israeli right, increasingly, that has been criticized for, a whole variety of reasons, some obvious, some not. I'm curious to throw that to you. I recall, you posting something or tweeting something recently among the effects of, well, it's good that Israel's getting aid from America, but it shouldn't be something that we should actually rely on forever. I mean, I'm curious, right now, again, we're talking, it's 9 a.m. Pacific time, October 1st, the Pentagon just said Iran might be launching another set of ballistic missiles. I mean, the relationship of Israel being able to stand by itself outside of American support, either military or funding. I mean, do you think that is a worthy goal? Do you want Israel to continue to basically be welded at the hip to America for better or worse?
Right. So first of all, I don't know if this is the post you're referring to, but I wrote a post yesterday thanking the administration. Again, it was after their statement about Nasrallah, I believe. And again, I want to be very clear. I have a tremendous amount of gratitude to the United States of America, including this administration. You know, they did send billions in aid. They did send military support. They are supporting this war, and that statement stands alone. And I'm not negating that statement. Okay, but the concept of the Jewish people being dependent on a foreign government for our self-defense, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. I mean, we know it doesn't work because we've been there. So I definitely do not want to. To me, it's not an ideal situation where we're dependent on someone else. Like you said before, I think that the relationship is absolutely mutually beneficial. If anything, I think America's getting on the receiving end here. But yes, there's a lot of talk about too much foreign aid, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't like the fact that we're so dependent on the United States, but let's be real. I mean, people don't realize this, but when they hear about the Iron Dome firing and detonating a rocket midair, which is in and of itself an absolute miracle, but that's a whole topic for another time, people don't realize each one of those missiles that we fire to save Israeli lives costs north of $100,000 each one. And there are days that we fire, I don't know, hundreds of them a day, right? So, I mean, just that alone, let alone the precision missiles that or precision bombs that we've used to detonate, to eliminate Hamas leaders, or the bunker busting bombs that we just used to kill Nasrallah. We need America. Let's just say it as it is. We need America right now. And nothing would make me happier than to have a relationship where both sides understand that, you know, we're both receiving here. It's mutually beneficial, but the reality is that's not how things are panning out. And that's not how things will continue to pan out. And so in an ideal world, and I don't know how we'll ever get there, if we will ever get there, I strongly believe that Israel needs to break up with America.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And just last final question before I ask you to delineate how listeners can, find you on the internet. What are your predictions? I mean, what do you think is going to happen with Israel? Obviously, there's a new war breaking out in the north. Israel bombed Yemen 2 days ago after the Houthis were launching rockets. Iran is getting into the mix. Obviously, this is at such an interesting inflection point. I mean, America, basically, what everyone thinks of Biden's policies, it's unclear where Biden is in all of this or, anything like that. What do you think is going to happen in the next couple of months? I promise I won't hold this against you in 6 months if you turn out to be wrong.
What do I think is going to happen? I don't know who's going to win the election. I hope it's in an ironic way. Part of me is like, you know what? Maybe if Kamala wins, then Jews will open their eyes and come home. So there's that. But I don't know who's going to win the election. I'm not enough of an expert to share my opinion on that. But
more so in Israel geopolitically, right. What do you hope that, Israel, yesterday, my cousin just, got called up to the border in the north, no idea where he is now. But Israel just, announced a small invasion of Lebanon, unclear. They, the IDF spokesperson said they're not going to go as far as in 2006, all the way up to Beirut, unclear, there's so much uncertainty right now.
Right. So, I know, pardon me for not being humble here, but I know what's going to happen because I know I have a keep on my head. I know how this ends, right? And it ends well for us, not so well for the people that come after us. And again, if anybody has any doubts what happens to the people that come after the Jews, just ask yourself how many Babylonians you know. And so, it will be okay. Israel will win this war. And, if there was any doubt how strong and how unbelievably powerful the IDF is a month ago, there's no doubt about that now. And so we have the ability, the capabilities to win this war definitively, including, the 7 fronts that we're facing right now. It's unbelievable. What other army could fight 7 armies? But this is Israel, and this is what we've always done. So Israel will win this war. Hamas will be no more. Hezbollah will be no more. Iran will be taken care of. I don't know what that means. I don't know how. I don't know when, but you can be sure that Iran's not getting a bomb. And our enemies will be no more. What was will no longer be. We will not have threats on our borders. And, at the end of the day, we will dance again because that's what we do. And, we, as a rabbi, this, and we every Jew out there will tell you that Purim's the happiest day of the year. And meanwhile, Purim was the near genocide of the Jewish people. The leader of the world, Achashverosh, 127 countries agreed to annihilate us. We were done. And here we are celebrating. And Hanukkah, it was a war we were not winning. And Pesach, 210 years of backbreaking slavery. And we celebrate today. So we're going to celebrate Simchas Torah again. We're going to dance again. And the most important thing that I need people to understand is that, everyone knows the catchphrase, the one-liner, Am Yisrael Chai. Everyone knows that. But that's not an empty phrase. Am Yisrael Chai is a historical reality. Okay, we are here, and our enemies throughout the generations are not. And not only are we here, but we're flourishing. We are defying nature and logic. We are dominating the world of innovation as a country smaller than New Jersey and the worst neighborhood on earth. It makes no sense whatsoever. And no matter what metric you want to look at, what Israel's doing is dominating the world of technology. It makes no sense. So we are here flourishing. Our enemies are gone. And that's what's going to happen. We will win this war. Our enemies will be gone. Those that stand in our corner will flourish with us. And those that don't will perish.
Okay, well, that is a statement that I will not have any pushback to or disagreement on. If listeners want to follow you and your writings and your work, what's the best way?
Yeah, I mean, I would say my Twitter is probably my most active platform. It's HILZ, like zebra, FULD. My last name, Hillel Fuld. My mom always called me Hills, so that's my brand. But yeah, I mean, I'm very, very active on all platforms. I would say LinkedIn, if you want the more conservative Hillel, who's not, let's say, as extreme. Even though I don't consider myself extreme, LinkedIn is probably the best place to follow me. But on Twitter, I'm, pretty straightforward about my opinions. Instagram and Facebook, I have to be aware of their algorithms, and I've gotten, mass reported many times. So I'm a little bit more conservative there as well. Those are the places.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, and stay safe with all the chaos happening in Israel right now.
Say a little prayer.